What are you doing?
Hi. Well, sorry we're late, everyone. I was getting my head waxed. Okay, not really, but
Yeah, Ron was getting his head waxed, and technology and me are not always besties, and my microphone decided not to work 2 minutes before, but I talk loud enough, so we're good.
yeah, it's been quite a 24 hours or so, hasn't it?
It has, and I wish I could really paint this picture to everyone watching because I know I wasn't on air with Ron and Sam, but I was in the chat and I was so excited that we were getting this information out. And when I first got the information about what had happened in Brian's petition, I was literally at a soccer field for anyone in California at Surf Cup in San Diego, my home away from home. And I was on the phone and literally like cheering and screaming, and it wasn't for my son's soccer game, I'll tell you that. And so I wish I had like just someone videoing me because I was like, yes, yes, yes. And it just kind of gave you some validation that everything we're all doing um, is for the right reasons. And I'm so glad that Brian actually used his voice.
And what I like is we talked about this months ago as to what we expect might happen, and to see it actually happen is really exciting, I think. And it's nice that Brian maybe has a chance to show what appears to us that prosecution just was not fair.
Yeah.
And to think that there's somebody who did this who has gone free. Nobody seems to think about that. Everybody seems to be frustrated about. It's all about Brian, about the killer trying to get out of it somehow. Nobody seems to be considering, did he really was he really coerced into this plea? Is he really not guilty? And if he's not guilty, then who is? And does that mean that there's somebody walking around out there who did that? That's the horrific thing.
Yeah, and I challenge the people that, aren't 100% convinced that BK didn't have anything to do with this. And everybody is entitled to their opinion. I think that we feel a little bit differently of going through every piece of evidence that's been available to us. But I know there's a huge population that believe that, hey, he could have been somehow, some way part of it, but he definitely didn't do it alone. And it doesn't really seem to bother the people that are kind of on that side of the fence that, hey, that there is another perpetrator or more perpetrators out there that just completely got away with this.
Yeah, I remember one of the things when I first came into this, I start with the guilty plea. I really came onto this after the guilty plea happened. And so I started with that. Hey, he pled guilty. And then we passed the 42 days to file a notice of appeal. And it's like, well, he didn't appeal. I mean, most of his appeal was waived by the plea, but he still could have filed something. And he passed that deadline and other deadlines. And, it's like, well, if he's innocent, if he didn't do it, if he really didn't do it, why isn't he pursuing some of these? Boom. Now he is. Hi,
Yeah,
welcome.
I'm with you. And GBN, if I had Alan Jackson's phone number in my Rolodex, I would, I'd probably make that call. And you know what? I probably could get it if I wanted to. But yeah, I would love to see someone with that tenacity to be able to push back when nothing is going their way. But yeah, Ron, I agree, and we've been talking about this for a while. How much did BK know with respect to his defense? So look at how much the volume that there was. If they're saying an entire legal team couldn't go through the discovery in a way to be fully prepared for trial, which was one of the last pleas that we heard from Ms. Taylor before the plea deal, then how the heck are we supposed to believe that that BK got all of this? Did he, in his petition? And I think that is a very honest petition. And I think that Ron and I are going to go through it briefly before we get into this. But Ron made such a great point yesterday. We were doing a live with Outcast last night, and Ron said, by Bryan doing this, his best case scenario is saying, I will face the death penalty again. I want my trial. If that is his best case scenario, what does that tell you?
I mean, just
Not someone
imagine,
who's going to
Chris,
hide under a plea deal.
he knows whether, whether he did it or not. He's right now, he's probably the only one. Well, I won't say that, but probably the only one for sure. One of the few, I'll say, who knows for sure whether he did it or not. If he's in his mind, if he knows he did it, why, and he got this plea deal that avoids the death penalty, why would he move to set that aside just to go back and face the death penalty again, knowing that everybody's going to be angry, everybody's already calling him a murderer, the victims' families are all, they want the closure, I know they want to think that justice has been done. Why would he go through that if in his mind he knows he did it? He got his best case scenario. He's not on death row.
Mm-hmm.
But if he's not guilty, then there's got to be some confidence in him. Then the evidence is going to show it, and especially a lot of the stuff that's come out. And we speculated a lot on whether he really knew all of this stuff that's been coming out. And guess what? Looks like he didn't.
No, he even said that in his petition that he didn't know some of the most beneficial evidence in his favor.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing, it's all about that hair in the hand, whether it was really, whether it was in his hand. I think more accurately, it was in his hand. And then when his hand fell down, it kind of came out of that and was stuck on the blood underneath his hand. And I think just as a shorthand way of talking, Dr. Turvey said there was hair in his hand. Well, technically, it was probably cupped around the hair, which was then stuck to the bed frame. And that's what it is. And I think he doesn't even know about the other clumps of hair, which we know there are photos of, and we've talked to people who have seen them and described them, of clumps of hair found. There was one in between on the bed in between Kaylee's legs and one between Maddie's, and those were described. There's nothing about those in Sutton's report or anything else. That's additional hair that is quite relevant, that was never tested. We know that was never tested because there's nothing in the reports that we've seen.
And in fact, wasn't that one of the first questions that we asked Dr. Turvey was, has it been tested? And he was like, great question. And, he was even adamant to say that he wouldn't testify as an expert in this case until that hair was tested, because he would look like, what kind of expert would he look like, Ron, if the first question on cross is, so if that hair was so important and you believe as a perpetrator, you tested it, right?
Yeah.
And he was very clear on that. Can you imagine Dr. Turvey lying about that, Ron? I have a really hard time believing that someone of his stature, his excellence, his training, his integrity, and he has shown nothing but integrity to Ron, Sam, and myself. Could you imagine him just saying that and there's no truth to it? I can't.
No, not Dr. Turvey. And yeah, he's both behind the scenes. We've been able to talk to him outside of the show a little bit and had other communications with him. This is someone that is going to toe that line, is not going to step over it. He does not need to lie, I think. And so, yeah, he's one I definitely trust him. We saw it in his report, or in at least what Paulette Sutton talked about his report. And we saw it when we talked to him. And I think he's going to play a part Again, I don't know this. I haven't talked to him about this, guys. But I expect he's going to show up in some capacity in these proceedings that happen.
In what fashion, Ron?
Well, I think he's going to be able to talk about some of the evidence. He's certainly going to be able to corroborate what was going on regarding that hair. And he's going to be able to he'd be able to tell just what he told us, that he told that he told Ann Taylor this has got to be tested, and she just ignored him about it. And that's going to be a big part, because I think then you're going to have, because Bryan's going to have to establish that there was evidence, potentially exculpatory evidence, that was hidden from him by his counsel. We're not at the prosecutor's hid evidence place right now. This is Sixth Amendment. This is, did he have effective counsel? And he's going to have to establish that he didn't. And to do that, he's going to have to show that she lied to him, that she withheld information from him, and that information was material to whether or not he would have accepted the plea. I mean, for all we know, he was told, their case is rock solid. You don't have a chance. You need to take a plea. And we know that was Cy Ray's opinion, even though I don't know what the evidence is. I've never seen it. The credible evidence.
I'm with you. I'm with you there, Ron. I know a lot of people are asking in the chat. Now, we know that Bryan filed this petition in pro se, pro per, interchangeable. That's just when you're representing yourself. Now, I don't think any of us expect that and I think he put in his petition that obviously this is going to get more complex than he's trained or comfortable with defending. So I think that we can estimate that do you think he'll have a new attorney, Ron? Do you think that one will be appointed by the state? How do you think that Hippler is going to handle that motion?
I would be surprised if Hippler doesn't appoint counsel for him. That's such a fundamental part of the criminal law process. And he certainly had counsel appointed before. The only caveat is, I think it's only death penalty cases, when death penalty is on the line, that the court the appointment of counsel is mandatory. The court still has discretion whether or not to appoint counsel, but I think that still has to be a reasoned legal decision, and he would have to state his findings on why he did not appoint counsel. I expect he's going to appoint counsel.
I mean,
because if he doesn't, he's potentially just opening up another ground on appeal. Because if Bryan loses this, then he can appeal this ruling.
Yep, and he can use the foundation that was laid in the proceedings to be able to use right against him.
Yeah.
Chris WPA, we are with you. Oh. I know that, we don't even have any swag. I need to have my friend help us with that. But we definitely need Team Turby. I agree. Hashtags. And crystal clear, don't get disappointed. Don't get offended by all of this mainstream media going absolutely nuts. The way I look at it is, hey, we haven't heard anything from them really much about this case other than the few YouTubers, right, that are still talking about it. So I think it's getting this case back out in front of people that it may not have been for a while. And hopefully there's more people being objective that are willing to listen. But just turn that crap off, and I wouldn't get too concerned with the bashing of BK, because that's all they have. And I think they're going to continue doing what they tried to do 3-4 years ago.
Yeah, they're not as educated about these things as you guys are, and as we've been trying to educate ourselves and then share that with you. This must have just come out of the blue as a complete surprise to them. Wasn't a surprise to us, and it probably wasn't a surprise to most of you guys, because we've been talking about this for months.
Yeah, we've been talking about it, we've been wishing, we've been praying, but to wake up and actually see it was a whole other level.
Yeah.
That was like Christmas morning, man,
Yeah.
like everything that everybody has done to seek truth and justice in this case. And you know what? I honestly, I just turned that crap on. We're going to watch a little bit of it on here with you, but we're going to actually make some points going through it. But once you can start looking at this stuff and just kind of, they're just recycling the same news stories they had 3.5 years ago. And the more that we can help get the truth out there, along with all of you, because truly you guys are brilliant, brilliant people. And it's all of us that get this information out there.
Yeah. Yeah. So, we hope, I like that we now have more stuff to talk about. I like that it's stuff that we've already talked about and anticipated, and that we're going to all go through this and see what happens. Again, if Bryan did it, if he truly did it, then he should rot in prison. I don't think he did it. Why? Because I've looked at all the evidence that's available to us, all of it, as much as I could. I've talked. I don't think anybody else out there has talked to as many members of the defense team as we have. And so I think we have some we've been able to get some unique insights from them. And we've been able to share a lot of those with you guys. But I think all these people spouting off about it, they're not aware of the tension between Turvey and Ann Taylor. They're not aware of how the documents were just dumped on them at the last minute, or of how Turvey was scrambling to try to address these things that were just coming up at the last minute. A lot of them don't know much about the knife sheath and the issues with that. And so, as we've gone through this process, we've been trying to share those people. We contact them, say, hey, come share this with our audience. And fortunately, Dr. Turvey and Chris Whitcomb and Chris Holland and Cy Ray have all been willing to do that, and that's given us a lot of I think insight and understanding. Sam,
hello.
Gotten to the point that I was able to say why you weren't even with us yet, but that you were coming. So look at Sammy.
Hello, everyone.
That is wondering where Sam was. She just had to finish a client issue before this. So she is joining us. And Ron, I just put up this message or this comment because it comes up a lot. Mm-hmm. And I want you just to kind of go through, and I think it actually touches on this I don't know, this media that we're going to share. I don't even know what to call it. But I don't know that people understand that if Ann did not say those things at the change of plea, the plea would not have gone through. But what does that show? If you're looking at this from an appellate perspective, what does the transcript, does the record show that everybody said they were ready on the change of plea? And, we're going to go with that, even though 2 weeks before, we know that Ann is literally arguing, saying that she cannot appropriately represent her client because she doesn't have all the discovery. Ron, walk us through that. Sam, you too, jump in.
Yeah, that's definitely going to have to be explained. And I think potentially that's where maybe Dr. Turvey and Bryan will be able to help, because I don't know how much Judge Hippler knew about the document dump and about all of that. I would think that as a judge, your role is to ensure that the prosecution is following the law and their responsibilities. And I really question even why the judge didn't bring it up when she had just been 2 weeks earlier complaining about not having all the documents and stuff. And then yes, I've had the opportunity to review everything. I think that's, again, a very nuanced statement by counsel. I think you could look at it not necessarily as I am fabricating a lie, as opposed to I am telling the truth. rather than my client and I are willing to waive our right to have to see this discovery and analyze this discovery, which we do that a lot with divorces, for instance, where there are certain disclosures that are required to be made by law. There's some that are made 2 times in the case. The first time we can't waive that, but the second time, supplemental disclosures and everything before trial, we can waive those. So if we went to the court and said we've had all the information, we've seen all the information, well, technically you haven't. You don't know. You're taking their word for it. You're presuming that there's nothing out there that is that you haven't seen, and you're waiving the ability to challenge that and to obtain and have time to see additional information. I see what she said as more kind of along those lines. I know, Your Honor, we've complained about the documents, and we've gotten documents late and everything, but we're willing to waive that under all the circumstances, which is why I think probably the judge was willing to take that, having just had her complaining 2 weeks earlier. Now,
well, and she was smirking too. Thank you, Meg P. Thank you, Meg P. And she
really
was smirking.
She really didn't want that to go to trial.
Well, but isn't that also a good point that you bring up, Ron, is that if you were the judge in this case, you would maybe be asking some more questions to narrow down a more specific type of waiver, because there's certain things like the document dump that we know could not have actually been gone through. And so if that's true, then doesn't that sort of help for Bryan's case, in that, there's a lot of circumstances there which kind of evidence that just because you say I'm doing this knowingly and intelligently, or just because you say I'm waiving my right to an appeal, doesn't necessarily mean that you are, right? It just seems like a buzzword that's being said. And so it seems to maybe strengthen Bryan's position that a week prior Anne is saying those things. And yeah, I recall the smirk too, Kristen. It's kind of like, I get that you have to say these magic words to get the plea to go through, but what are the circumstances that led to the plea? And then is it really accurate that you had enough time to go through discovery? Could you actually objectively, from a reasonable person standard, look at that and say that anyone would have had the ability to make that waiver or representation to the court?
Yeah.
Especially if there's aggressive coercion going on as well behind the scenes.
Yeah, we don't know the extent of it, and I expect we're going to learn more of that once we get the amended petition. But if I was the judge, and just for people's benefit, I kind of am sometimes. I am a sworn temporary judge in Riverside County, which means it's a volunteer position, which means once or twice a month I go and I sit and I put the robe on and everything, and everybody calls me Your Honor, and I come out and I rule on a lot of times domestic violence cases and so forth. So I do have a little bit of the training that judges go through, and I'm expected to have that. I took the same oath that the judges take. And so sometimes if I'm the judge, I do have a little bit of perspective. I don't have quite the experience that most of them do, but I do have a little perspective. I understand that in Idaho, Bryan was not required to allocute, meaning to give more facts, specific facts. And I understand that the judge is not required to ask that. But I think there are circumstances where that should be done. And I'm having a hard time understanding why this is not one, other than everybody knew that if he was required to do that, it was going to undermine the plea, in which case I question the prosecution and the judge for allowing the plea to happen, because he didn't know. I mean, if we assume that he really is innocent, he couldn't know, for instance, where the knife was, what order, what happened inside, what, explain why Dylan was just ignored. It would be things like that. Some of the details he'd be required, and he couldn't. I think if he's innocent, he couldn't have done that. And so under those circumstances, no, you wouldn't want him to allocute.
But then you have MSM just simply saying, and any other professional on that side of the tracks that wants to allude to the fact, well, he couldn't say anything and we didn't even ask because we knew that he just wouldn't tell the truth. I mean, that seems to me like it was a big cop out, but it is up to the judge with respect to allocution. Yeah. But I'm wondering if that was something that was negotiated in the terms of the plea deal. Hey, I will take this, but I'm not telling you anything about how it happened or how it went down because I can't tell you. And so in exchange, we're not going to ask you to allocute. I mean, that's something that I've thought potentially could have happened for a while.
Yeah. And it's going to be really interesting too with, you remember Steve G's offhand comment at CrimeCon about the Alford plea, how Bryan wanted to do that. I'm going to be watching to see what comes out about that. Did he really want to do an Alford plea? And how
I don't even know
that
he was privy to any of that information. But hey, maybe he was. But I would like to see actual facts come out.
Yeah. So I don't know. Sometimes
it's a good question for either one of you, Sam, Ron, either one of you. This is Sarah's question, and it's a good one.
Even if stuff was hidden, you got to think they have a team and couldn't get through all the docs. So how would Bryan be in jail? Or Bryan in jail be able to read everything nonstop daily by himself? Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good
smarter point. Than the MSM.
I think it's a really good point to bring up because I just go back to the fact that Anne's saying that she doesn't have the ability to move forward with trial, and then such a short time later, standing next to Bryan, saying that they've had essentially an opportunity to go through everything. In summary, right? It's how do those two things really exist? I think that might be part of the reason why Hibbler isn't necessarily asking more questions regarding, like, you understand you have a right to review all of your discovery and you've thoroughly gone through it, and maybe there's other stuff you haven't gone through, but you're waiving that right. I just think those things are so inconsistent, and I think, like many things, there's a desire to kind of breeze through those seemingly inconsistent things. And I mean, I agree. I don't know how he could plausibly have had the ability to go through those things. I think it was pretty clear that there's just such an insane amount of documents to go through in general, which.
Yeah, I go back to Chris just telling us, right after I was finishing my book or I was concluding and we were getting it ready for publishing, I got an email with like 8,000 something attachments. And that came late in the game. And I've never stopped thinking about that. Oh my gosh, if I got an email with 8,000 attachments, I would first of all freak out because that would overwhelm me. But that would take like an entire team of organizing, filing, because, we all know that they were just sent everything kind of haphazardly and there wasn't a whole lot of organization, and that maybe it was intentional, maybe it wasn't. But I always go back to that. And I'm like, so how do we have Anne, or her team taking 20 bankers boxes to the prison every time we need to talk about new evidence that came in or new discovery that was received? I just go back to the fact that I believe there was probably a lot that he just didn't know. Mm-hmm. And then do you think, either of you think, if he didn't know, do you think his, parents that might have been supporting, were they looking at this blind as well? I go back and I look at a lot of that.
It's interesting. You go back and you look at that conflict between Ann Taylor and Dr. Turvey after the book came out, and how she really went at him. You wonder if this is the reason why she did that, because could it be that the book put some things out in the public that even Bryan didn't know because she didn't tell him? And so, of course, she would want to discredit Dr. Turvey, who was the source of a lot of those facts. So that's going to be really interesting. And Kristen, Sam, do you think Dr. Turvey's going to shy away from going after Ann Taylor if he needs to during this
No.
process?
I think he'll do it professionally, but no.
He will, yeah.
I don't get the vibe that Dr. Turby is really afraid of anyone or anything. I believe he's very confident in what he does and what he is good at, and he knows he is, one heck of a criminologist. And there's nothing that I've heard from him or seen from him that has made me second guess that he's trying to get disinformation out there. But no, I don't think that Turby would probably be intimidated by many people at all.
Mm-mm.
And I think that's what Bryan needs.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to be really anxious to see who the attorney is that he gets, if they say anything. But the next filing, which I expect, I don't know if there are other preliminary filings that they have to do, but the next big one it should be an amended petition. That's going to probably include affidavits, declarations, probably some exhibits, evidence. It actually could be pretty bulky itself. I expect we may see a lot of information there that hasn't been released yet through FOIAs.
I don't
All right.
disagree. Sam, you have
we got another
one?
question here. Do you think Hitler was angry with Ann T for taking on another death penalty case? So maybe why he didn't let Ann have more time? What do you guys think?
I hope not.
I don't think that's a big issue. I mean, it's definitely an issue if she's having a hard time being able to complete everything that she needs to do for this case, but she had a team. And I think if that was the case, then she shouldn't, as an attorney, she shouldn't have ethically or professionally taken the case, because you have to be able to zealously represent your client at all phases of the case. And if she couldn't do that, then again, that's on her for taking that case. But I don't think that Hitler was necessarily angry at Ann T for that. I could be wrong. I don't know.
I would hope that he wouldn't punish Bryan because of Ann taking on a completely unrelated case for another client. I don't think that's equitable. I don't think it's fair. And so I would hope that did not happen.
But what do you think, Ron, about his decision not to allow more time?
Well, I think I know that there's an issue about the speedy trial and waiver of a speedy trial. And
but we're 3 years past that. But we were 3 years past that at the end, towards the end.
Yeah.
I mean, you really think that was still an issue 3 years later?
Yeah, I don't know. I really would like more information about how all the discovery happened and what efforts were made. I'd love to hear kind of especially what was going on there at the end. I know that there's a lot of judges that are very protective of their calendars, that are very resistant to continuances. And it's a situation where they generally are able, if an attorney's not ready, that's on you, counsel. You knew when this trial was, because this was going to be a long trial. And so his calendar was cleared for that trial. Isn't
it true? Sorry.
Uh-huh.
I was just going to say, isn't it true that the right to a speedy trial is really the defendant's right?
It is the defendant's right. And I know there was some concern about waiving that. I think if you waive your right to a speedy trial, then that opens it up to be put off and put off and put off. And I think there's some reason in that instance, the prosecution might want to do that because Bryan's in jail. He's not going anywhere, and they can continue to gather and put together their case as well. But when the defense is saying over and over, complaining over and over and over, we don't have time, we don't have time. Well, you want them to be in that position where they haven't been able to analyze everything. So yeah.
But I guess my observation or concern is if the defendant is the person with the right to a speedy trial and the defendant is saying they're not ready to go to trial, why are we forcing them to trial when there's objectively terabytes of documents that any reasonable person, any person would be able to go through?
Mm-hmm.
And would he be ratifying potentially, like that he's waiving that right by Anne being the one repeatedly to ask for it? Seems like he would be ratifying that right, that he's waiving it. And he did, we all remember, he did give her a continuance. It was like 2 weeks, I think, the last one that he gave on the record, which why even do a continuance at that point? But Ron, if you're looking at this and you're just looking at the transcripts from that last hearing and you don't know much about the case, and I'm calling you and I say, hey, can you consult in and give me your feedback as an appellate attorney? And you have the lead attorney on a case saying, I am not ready, I'm not prepared, I cannot effectively represent my client because I haven't been able to do X, Y, and Z. If you're saying that and you're putting in that on the record, I mean, I think that would be so strong an appeal. I mean, that's how I started, all caps.
Yeah, I'm saying you're putting there in the record grounds for him to claim ineffective assistance of counsel.
Yeah. Sam looks like Charlize Theron. You know what? We've actually had another subscriber say that.
Thank you. That's very nice.
That is it's absolutely a compliment, but I'm usually the one that puts them up. And I was like, I think someone else has said that. And after that person said it, I was like, you know what? Kind of do, Sam. All right. This one I'm just going to put up because I think it's kind of funny. Yeah, I think there's a lot of people that maybe got off on an investigation that was, maybe not as proper or intense or as strict to following procedures and processes that it should have been. I think there's quite a few people that are questioning their life choices right now. This is speculation. We're just speculating. We're not apportioning blame to anybody. But yeah, I didn't wake up with that feeling, so I know we're good.
Yeah.
All right, you guys want to... Go ahead, Ron.
I think there's a lot of pressure in Moscow to have this wrapped up and done and everybody move on. And I think there's a lot of people in power in Moscow.
Yeah. And, it's funny. We've been able to chat with some people that, live in Idaho or the area. And it's always interesting to hear new information from other people. And it's like, you kind of get mixed responses. Is yes, there's people that want this done and handled. And, we don't want to be the center of this sensationalized case anymore. And then you get the people that are like, no, people have no clue what really happened. And, we're gonna help try to hold everybody accountable. So it seems to be like a mixed bag, which I can appreciate. The people that live there are like, yeah, we want to get over with it, but at the same time, this is so messed up. All right, you want to start going through the video that we pulled, Ron?
Yeah. Oh, it just came to mind my celebrity comparison for Sam. Taylor Tomlinson, the comedian.
Who is that?
You even talk like her.
I don't know who that is, Ron.
Oh my gosh.
Stand by while I Google that.
I was like, I don't know who it is, so I can't help you out there, Sam. But we will keep everyone. Yeah, we need to come up with a Ron's doppelganger. But we will be following everything that's filed on behalf of Bryan, by representation of Bryan, and we will stay up to it and jump on the second that anything is filed, and for us to continue exploring. But let's look at some of this mainstream media, and let's all comment on together. And in the chat, we want to hear from you. So put up all your questions, comments, and we want to make sure that you guys are engaged with us, because we're all watching this for the first time. Mm-hmm. Which may go well or not. We'll see.
The man who admitted to murdering 4 University of Idaho students just 1 year ago is now trying to take it all back. After pleading guilty and accepting 4 consecutive life sentences, Bryan Kohberger is now claiming he's innocent, arguing that his confession was the product of false promises and bad legal advice. Tonight, we sit down with investigative reporter Kevin Fixler to break down exactly what Kohberger is claiming, why overturning a guilty plea is one of the most difficult challenges in criminal law, and whether his arguments have any realistic chance of succeeding. We also ask what this means for the families of Kaylee Gonzalez, Madison Mogan, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin, and answer the question, is today's filing a legitimate legal strategy or simply the latest chapter in one of America's most notorious murder cases? All this and more on Courtroom Confidential.
And Ron,
Good evening and welcome, everyone. It is Monday, July.
Huh?
He's a defense attorney, a very experienced defense attorney, is my understanding. Is that correct?
Dr. Ritter. Yeah, I think he is. Yeah.
I think he has some appellate experience as well. I actually, shockingly, I was watching a documentary that just came out on the Scott Peterson with the recent appeal that was denied, and he was actually talking with a former prosecutor, and I found it to be a pretty engaging conversation on that case. I think it's a completely different set of facts, so you can't compare the two. But it is very clear he is knowledgeable about criminal defense work as well as some appellate work.
Yep. All right.
July 27th, 2026, and this is your Monday night special from Courtroom Confidential, the fastest growing true crime news channel on YouTube. Thank you, everybody, so much for being here. To Dandy Lioness and Allie Foley, Carol B., Allie Tude, good to see all of you. Suze S. and Crazy Mary Fitz. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for carving out some time to be with us. It has been a very busy breaking news day in true crime, so I'm glad that you were able to join us in this evening in particular. If this is your first time, please say hello. I would love to hear that. If this is your first time joining us, please say hello. To let us know where you're from in the chat. Even if you're watching this on replay, we would love to hear that. Let me introduce myself to those of you who are new, perhaps watching on YouTube or X or Facebook. My name is Joshua Ritter. I'm a former prosecutor with the LA District Attorney's Office. I was there for 10 years before I left to go into private practice as a criminal defense attorney. And this is Courtroom Confidential, where we do our best to give you both sides of the courtroom, both sides of the issues, both sides of the stories. And this is our Monday night special, where we take a look ahead at the week in true crime. Tonight, on the docket, a couple of really big cases that we've been following closely. First, Bryan Kohberger is back in the news because, shockingly, or not so much, depending on how you think about it, he has filed a petition to withdraw his plea. And we will ask the question and try to answer, can he do that? And will it be successful? We'll be sitting down with Kevin Fixler from the Idaho Statesman to discuss that. But also, opening statements were today in the Lindsay Clancy case, and it's already started off as a heavily emotional case. We are going to sit down with Elise Hershon. She is a Boston criminal defense attorney and legal.
It was a very busy day, as you can imagine. It's like drinking from a fire hose.
Yeah, I bet. I heard whisperings early in the day that there's some big Bryan Kohberger news coming. And I'll be honest, I thought to myself, not again with this guy, not again with the big breaking news. What could this possibly be? This is not one that I saw coming. Tell us how you first heard.
Who saw it coming? We did, right? Sorry, I just had to.
No, I like it, Ron. I like the commitment to that. I thought it was interesting. I thought it was interesting that he said he heard whisperings. It's like, did you know and we all knew, or did someone tell you before? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I want people to keep in mind that his whole introduction on himself, just keep this in mind as we go through this, was to make sure that the public is getting both sides of this story.
Mm-hmm.
I found that he said both sides 3 times.
Yep. All right.
Heard that this might be happening.
Well, I know Mike Baker at the New York Times, and he'd alluded to basically, be prepared, something could be coming. And that was the extent of what I was able to obtained from him, and then I played the waiting game like everybody else. So at least I had the benefit of sort of knowing to keep clicking the refresh on the homepage of the New York Times. But he obviously broke yet another major scoop in this case. It's the second time he has spoken to a member of the Kohberger family, and this is the one everybody was sort of chasing. And so here it is, and you know, we see how this played out. So they broke the news, and then, you know, I just tried to pick up the scraps and try to get reactions and do my job too.
I will tell you, I've come to know some news people now.
What?
I said enforce my narrative, which is what he should have added at the end of his little speech.
Journalists and TV news folks, and they are more tight-lipped than the CIA. When it comes to like breaking stuff, it's always these whisperings of something's coming, but I probably told you already too much, and just wait till later. I was, again, getting it from people at Fox, yourself, others saying, hey, something's going to happen. Can't tell you what. And I will say it didn't disappoint as far as this is, I think, big breaking news in this case. So for everybody who is maybe finding this out for the first time, we're hearing for the first time from Bryan Kohberger himself. He actually issued a written statement. Again, Mike Baker from the New York Times first reported on this. I'm going to actually read to you the entire statement. It's not all that long, but I think it's important because these are his words and him expressing himself. It doesn't sound like he had advice of counsel or somebody helping him write this. This is from him directly.
I would say yes or no on that. Some of the keywords that he included in his petition, I would expect he probably had somebody who at least gave him some of that information. We've talked amongst ourselves how great it would be to talk to Bryan Kohberger, but we have not made any effort whatsoever to try to talk to him directly. I think that is that's a result of us being lawyers. I know in my head, my concern has been, I don't want to induce him to say something that violates his Fifth Amendment rights, because I've thought that potentially there are things coming down, you know, like this, hopefully. I know that as part of this petition, he's going to have to in some way not violate that, but waive a portion of those rights. But I've always wanted that to be a discussion between him and an attorney who is representing him on this. So I know we've talked about how awesome it would be to go talk to him, and I think people have said, hey, why don't you guys go try and talk to him? We've never made the effort, and that is why, that, at least in my mind, is why. And I think we see we're going to start to see, I think, a little bit why. And that's why I'm a little surprised he actually spoke on the record to somebody from the New York Times. It sounds like there was a recording. We haven't heard the recording. I don't know that we will.
Right. And just to add to that point, though, Ron, the reason why our communication with him would be different, because if you're, regardless of the fact that we're lawyers, it would need to be the lawyer that's representing him to have that attorney-client privilege attach.
Yeah. Yeah. And our purpose is in talking to people to bring them to the channel and to get them talking. I just have not been interested in doing that to Bryan, because I don't think this case is over. And I certainly would not want to be the one that induced him to, you know, say something that ultimately comes around and harms him.
Yeah,
could potentially harm him.
Yeah, and looking back now, you remember all those months and years that we heard that, you know, Anne is protecting him to the point where she's controlling who can see him or who can talk to him. And I've never known if that was entirely true, because I'm not entirely sure how it works at that prison. You know, I think BK probably has to approve or disprove anyone to have any sort of communication with him. I don't know. But looking back now, when you hear how, was it more than protective? Was it blind trust? Because we did hear a lot that she controlled with respect to him and who he talked to, who he did anything with, was completely controlled by her. Do either of you think that that holds a little different weight here today with what his allegations are?
Well, I do think as a matter of course, as an attorney, you're going to want to tell your client, especially someone who is facing very serious criminal charges, not to talk to other people. So it's hard to balance those two, because that just for me would be a matter of course, regardless of the fact that maybe there's nothing that would incriminate them if they are to speak to someone else, just the way things could be taken out of context, and just sort of overall arching of wanting to maintain that attorney-client privilege. But with all that being said, I do think that with that privilege comes a great potential of power and control dynamic. And I certainly don't know what exactly went on between them, because we weren't in the room with them or we weren't privy to those conversations. But I think I always have a little level of concern that sometimes that attorney-client communication could include communications that maybe exceed the scope of your representation and start to be more of a decision maker, or potentially that attorney is not providing the facts necessary for that individual to make meaningful decisions, which is, I think, what in part Bryan appears to be alluding to in his affidavit.
Yeah, and at some point, do you have to, as an attorney, you know, we've all seen some of these high profile cases, and we've seen defense attorneys, you know, use the media to their advantage. It happens in civil attorneys. It happens in criminal defense attorneys. You know, we saw it with Alan Jackson, and I promise all of you, if I had his cell phone number, I would send him a text, but I don't. But yeah, we've seen some of these high profile defense attorneys use the media in their advantage. And there are times where I have questioned if Bryan wanted to ever speak out on his behalf. And I'm sure there would be guidelines of, hey, if you say this, that this can be used against you here. But I wonder if, you know, he ever wanted to do that, or his family wanted to do that. And Anne was like, no, that's a hard no, absolutely. Because at some point it's your client's life, right? As attorneys, we guide them, we navigate them, we give them the information, but at the end of the day, we're not the ones that are going to serve prison time for their actions or their inactions. That's up to them. And so I wonder.
Yeah. All right.
Here's what he has to say. Over a year later, it is self-evident that in State versus Kohberger, justice was not served. Unanswered questions seem to multiply with each piece of discovery unsealed, and the public demands the truth.
Does that sound familiar? That concept sound familiar to you guys? Haven't we said that over and over? Everything that comes out seems to point against his guilt. So, which again makes me question, how much did he know of what the defense had?
Great question, Ron. We're going to get to the bottom of it at some point. That would be one of the top 10 questions I would ask Bryan.
Yeah.
How did you get anything that was filed in this case? How did you go over it? Did you and Ann have a process? Did you meet with the other attorneys? How often did you see stuff that was filed, you know, against you or in favor to you? And I would love to know that answer.
Yeah.
Fortunately, the truth shall never be derived from the state's myopic narrative, a work of fiction which has yet to evolve since the PCA was released nearly 4 years ago, and its faulty premise was never challenged at trial. Circumnavigated by a broken plea, the trial never provided the public the clarity conducive to closure, and justice shall remain abjectly miscarried unless that plea is withdrawn.
Well, that was definitely a shout out to Chris Whitcomb in his book. So my guess is he at least knows of the book. I didn't catch that before. I think that's a very interesting phrase.
I hereby declare my intention to enter a not guilty plea and welcome the state the opportunity to prove their case at trial, as well as to again file the death penalty. My actual innocence is my truth, and the plea hinged on by false promises and blatant disinformation must be withdrawn. Thank you for all who believe in my innocence and continue to critically analyze the case I send my love to my family, who has never wavered in their belief in who I am, their belief in my innocence.
That's a strong statement.
Yeah, and although I certainly agree with being careful with what you say to the media because of your Fifth Amendment concern, I do also like that he has said something. I like that we're finally getting to hear something, because a lot of, I can't imagine the situation of feeling like you want to say something, but you're sort of in a position where you can't because you're unsure of how it could be used against you. And so I do actually like that there is some movement in sort of producing a different narrative to the media. And I know that some people don't like this narrative or rejecting it, but I do like that he's made this statement.
Mm-hmm. And he recognizes that by doing this, he's opening himself up to the death penalty again. Why?
I really wish everybody would really understand the importance of that.
I keep asking that question. If you knew you did this, why would you be opening yourself up to the death penalty again? I mean, what do you hope, if you're innocent, and this is where I think a lot of defense attorneys have issues with their clients in making plea agreements. And, we see it on the shows all the time where they dramatize that, the client says, but I didn't do it. Well, we need to plea and you'll do this and you'll get probation and then we can move on. And we see over and over, that's not a fiction. People enter guilty pleas on a plea bargain all the time when they maintain their innocence. And in fact, the fact is you have an offered plea, specifically a plea agreement where you don't admit guilt. It's essentially saying, I'm not going to contest the charges because, I know that there's evidence, but I'm not going to say I'm guilty and that I did it. But
so Ron, if that's kind of where that statement kind of comes into play. If he did it and he knows he did it, and we're just speaking like just off the cuff here. No, we're just speaking in theory. But would it be a legal justice for everybody if he did it and he, is going back to trial facing the death penalty? Then the prosecution will get their opportunity to get him the death penalty, which is what they were moving for right off the bat. And then on the flip side, by the plea deal, was that a legal justice for the prosecution? Because they put this man that they have claimed for years and years and years was a psycho, stalker, all of the things that we've heard that were just not supported by evidence. Was that the legal justice for them, that they put him away for the rest of his life, plus 10?
Yeah, it's just, I mean, I don't think you can lay bare yourself so fully as he's doing here, saying, I took the plea. It was based on misinformation. I didn't know a lot of stuff. I was coerced into it. I know I'm innocent. I'm going to throw myself back into court, back into a jury trial, face the death penalty again. And I am confident I will beat that because I know I didn't do it. And I know the state doesn't have the evidence to show that I did. I would love somebody to explain what possible benefit someone who knows they did it could get from filing this petition and agreeing to go back and face the death penalty in a jury.
Very powerful.
And that's a jury drawn from people who have spent the last year calling him a killer because he pled guilty. In front of jurors who believe he did it because he supposedly admitted it in this plea deal. So, if I was not sure about his innocence before this. I don't, until I can grasp why somebody who did this would take this step. I think that this just is another one of those things that is becoming public, that is pointing to somebody else committed these murders. And why doesn't anybody care that somebody else, it looks like, committed these murders? Somebody else who could be in the community now.
Well, and just taking it sort of one thing at a time, if what Bryan alleges is true in his affidavit, it's concerning that you could potentially be in a position where you really have not had a fair right to a trial, which is a fundamental constitutional right for all of us humans, or should be, right, us U.S. citizens. Why is that not a concern? So if those are the allegations, the next step is to figure out what those are, which I'm hoping some of that gets unfolded by the fact that although Ann's no longer his attorney, some of that information, with Bryan being the holder of the privilege, is likely to come out as those allegations continue, because they sort of necessitate us knowing that information before anyone can really decide whether or not the plea was taken under, misinformation, et cetera. So that's a concern too, even if you just take the facts of the case to the side for a second, which are extremely important, don't get me wrong, but just looking at the fundamental judicial process and your right to a fair trial, how you enter a plea, what the potential sentence is, all of that stuff is extremely important. So to just ignore that, I think is really a fundamental wrong.
Yeah, what I think something that a lot of people have trouble with is that our criminal justice system is set up to make it more likely that a guilty person goes free than for an innocent person to be found guilty and to have to be punished for something they didn't do. And it's not perfect, because innocent people are punished for things they didn't do. And it's also not perfect because I think a lot more guilty people go free than innocent people are punished. But that's the choice that the people who created our justice system made, that we would rather be right about somebody's guilt than wrong, than wrong and finding them guilty when they weren't guilty. That's why you have cases like OJ, who went free. And we all know he did it, but he went free, and that's part of the justice system. That was a fair trial. I lived through it. I think I was in law school when that was going on, that's the justice system working to ensure that innocent people are not found guilty. So that's why it's so much harder for me to stomach an innocent person being convicted of something that they didn't do than a guilty person walking, because that's how our justice system is designed.
Yeah, I agree. And this one's a really hard one to stomach. And I brought this comment up, Angela, and we talked about it briefly, but don't get discouraged with what people are saying on the MSM. A lot of it is just regurgitating scripts that were put in front of them on a teleprompter. But I do agree with you that I think one of the bigger issues in this case that still is not as transparent as I would hope is that this, yes, BK is innocent. We hope that we are on the right side of history with this one and that we're all doing everything we can. But the next step to that analysis is this could be you, your child, your family member. This could very easily happen to any of us. So we are fighting for so much more than an innocent person being wrongfully convicted, because that's grossly important. But we are also fighting for everybody's constitutional rights and due process rights. And I think that is something that is slowly gaining more traction. And I hope that this case can bring that more to the forefront as we continue through this litigation process.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong. I want whoever did this to rot in jail for the rest of their lives. I'm not a big death penalty person, but certainly they need to be punished.
And there's one other comment, and Sam and I agree with you, Ron. There's one other comment that says that broken plea, is this what started it? I actually was chatting with him the other day, Chris, and three of us have a lot of respect for Chris. I think he was the person that put this case back on the map for a lot of people outside of our community that never stopped. But I think his nonfiction book of getting it out there and just using facts that were from the investigation and the actual evidence, I think he has been huge at getting this case to where we're at today. And, not every author is going to have everything perfect in a nearly 500-page book. And we also, Chris, I remember asking him a while back, do you know if you have everything? And he's like, Kristen, there's just so much. You get an email and there's 8,000 pages attached, and you don't even know what you've looked at. But I have a lot of respect for Chris for writing that book, putting himself in the middle of that, and getting this case going, because I think that led to Turvey, and then I think Turvey led to another expert, and then it led to Cy. And the more people we can get to talk about this case, whether or not we agree with their personal conclusion, is the better for Bryan.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, we knew before we brought him on the show, we knew Cy Ray was going to say that he thought Bryan was guilty and he thought the evidence was overwhelming. And that doesn't scare us, because, the evidence is what it is. And we really are searching for truth. And if he could have convinced us that the evidence was overwhelming, that Bryan did this, he's welcome to try. And we listen to him and talk to him with open minds. And we ended that interview with everybody respecting everybody else, and he said his piece. And we go on and we look at the evidence that we see, and he did not convince me. He convinced me that there were more problems than I even knew with the prosecution. But I'm not. I wasn't convinced of Bryan's guilt, and this only serves, like everything else that's come out, to support the hypothesis that Bryan was coerced into this plea.
Well, I just put this comment up for you guys, and yeah, this actually, if it's true, I haven't heard this. But yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
Because Fixler is the guy from the Idaho Statesman, for those of you that may not know. And then Mike Baker is the one that wrote the article for New York Times that interviewed BK. So definitely keep our eyes on that. Yeah,
I'd be really interested in that book. I want to see everybody's perspective. And Fixler is he's in Idaho. He's been living this.
All right, we got a super chat. Thank you. Do you feel Bryan is watching his paper play out and speak for itself?
I don't know. I've never given that paper so much weight as a lot of people do. I mean, I think he was getting his PhD in criminology. I don't know. Maybe one of you can better answer. I've just never put a lot of weight on that, hey, I wrote this paper, so now I'm going to go get myself arrested for a quadruple homicide to see if my paper plays out, or if my penmanship work was on point. I just didn't give it that much weight. If you found that on my phone, yeah, it might be a little concerning. I'm not getting a PhD in criminology.
Yeah. Let's see. Chris Tat asked me a question. You said BK must have been involved. Do you still hold that opinion along with others? I do not. Again, my opinions are always subject to change as evidence comes out. To me, the evidence that has come out, coupled now with this, strongly suggests to me that he was not involved at all. I think there with what we know about the knife sheath, and the supposed DNA evidence on that, I think there are enough questions there that I'm far more comfortable doubting that than I am doubting Bryan's assertions at this point that he is completely innocent. Because again, if he was involved and he got this set aside, he still could face the death penalty for being involved, even if he didn't commit the murders himself. So, he's still, even if he's involved at all, opening it up. And Cy Ray, honestly, excuse me, his report is, I think, what really strongly convinced me that there was no connection, because he said in his report, and I think he's backed off a little or softened it a little in the book and in what he said, but in his report, he said there is no evidence of any contact whatsoever between Bryan and any of the victims. They were never in the same place at the same time. And there is only one common contact that they had, which was a U-Haul dealership, where he contacted the same contact that they did. If he was involved in this in some way, I would expect more of those sort of contacts to be there. And in fact, contacts with maybe other people who were involved, which again, we don't see in any of his phone records at all.
Right. All right. We have another super chat from Denise. Thank you, Denise. And let me pull up another question for you. Thank you for the super chat. Okay, late to jumping in, so sorry if you've addressed. What does getting an untainted jury with all the docs and years of mainstream narrative?
I don't think you're going to get an untainted jury. I think what you hope for is that you get a jury that's willing to listen to the evidence and make a decision based only on the evidence.
I think that's a really great point. At this point, it seems like you would be looking just for a jury that is open to objectively look at the evidence and to further be cognizant of jury instructions and the burdens at play, which include that it's the prosecution's burden to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that this happened.
Yeah. So I think at this point, especially in Idaho, I don't know that you're going to get an untainted jury. I think what you want is a fair jury. And I think you can find that. I think there are enough people out there that are willing to focus on the evidence, to do their duties as citizens, and to ensure that justice is done.
I agree. I think that's well put. All right. Another super chat, just trying to get through these. It felt at times Cy laughed and mocked some questions and avoided others. What are your thoughts?
I haven't really watched our interview back. I don't always like to do that. I lived it. I don't necessarily want to do that. I don't know that I had the impression he was laughing unreasonably. I don't.
An uncomfortable laugh, or the one laugh and I think it's just maybe a nervous twitch or a smirk or a laugh. But when I had asked him if, in his expertise, did he believe that the defense was hiding or concealing any evidence from the prosecution, he paused, he sighed, and then it was kind of an uncomfortable laugh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Again, I didn't feel anything but respect from him coming to us, or at least to me. We may be a little tainted ourselves as lawyers because we're used to, we basically argue with people for a living. And so I think our threshold of being offended at something is probably a bit different than people who aren't doing that on a daily basis. But I didn't feel, I didn't feel disrespected or mocked in any way. I think he has some very clear opinions, and I think there may be there may have been questions or positions that he didn't think much of. And I don't mind that, because there's positions and questions that I don't think much of. No, I was very, I thought it was a fun to be part of. And I came away with nothing but respect for him. I just have a different opinion.
And Sam, Ron and I talked about this with Outcast on his show last night, and I wanted to get, I wanted to get your take. I look back at that interview, and we knew that his interview was going to be controversial, and we tried to kind of put that out there a little bit in the month or two leading up to it, that, hey, he might not be the person that so many people thought he was going to be, the ticket to exoneration. But some of the things he said in our interview are incredibly helpful to BK and his new defense team. And I think if we can just separate that, yeah, you know what, we don't agree with his theory, maybe not coming on our show and saying that he thought he was guilty was the best route when you were an expert for the defense. But I will say, I think that he did cross that blue line, and that he did call out appropriate people that he found were a disgrace to this investigation and law enforcement as a whole. And I think if people can go back and just find, 10 statements that he made that were helpful to us, to Bryan and his new defense team, I think at the end of the day that interview was still incredibly powerful to have to get that information out there.
Yeah, and all the respect to Cy for that, because not a lot of people would have gone that far. And so that was Cy. He had to be honest, even though we know he's very closely tied with law enforcement. And that had to be a difficult statement for him to make. And he made it because he believed it and it was true. So yeah, absolutely. I think there's going to be more benefit come out of that interview for Bryan than harm, honestly.
Yeah, and I think I really, just in absorbing the different opinions that were given to us, I do think it's important to continue to separate his opinion in general, some of which may be from general experience, and his experience and the specific scope of his retention as an expert on a specific issue in that case. And so while we're all very opinionated on different issues, and none of us are experts in this case, like formally an expert for the defense is what I mean, the reality is there is a difference in those opinions. It's a lay opinion versus an expert opinion. And so I think it's important to separate that, no matter how you disagree with some of the comments. For example, when he's making a comment about the cleanup, that wasn't really something that he wasn't an expert in that area. So I can't be confident that he knew all the information or had all the information or was qualified over that. I don't know. I know he has a lot of different qualifications, and maybe in the past or in different cases has been qualified in other areas. But as far as this case, I don't have enough information to know what he looked at and what he was formulating that opinion from. I think that's really important, because as attorneys, when you're putting an expert on the stand and they talk for 15, 20 minutes about their CV and their area of expertise, and we make them qualified over a particular subject, we do that so we know what they're looking at, what they've reviewed in formulating that opinion. And that's really the basis for having experts when you're having them testify or cross-examining them in a case, which is why you always hear the battle of the experts. And, experts do sometimes disagree. Surprise, surprise. So that's what I thought.
Yeah, and sometimes it's not what they do say; it's also what they don't say or what they don't elaborate on. I think that we asked some questions regarding what he was relying on with respect to the cleanup, and it was kind of a little bit brushed off. Or, well, I think we even asked him, "Did you see everything that was involved with the cleanup? Pictures, investigative reports, everything? Did you see everything that Ann's seen?" And I think he said, "Well, I don't know what I haven't seen," and that is true, because there was so much in this case. But I think the rumor has it, I don't know how true this is now in light of everything going on, but the rumor had it that Ann was very structured with her experts, and that certain people had access to certain evidence or pictures or whatever that discovery was. Now, I do think that Cy and Ann had a very close professional working relationship, and I do think that maybe he had access to more than some of the other experts. I don't know.
Yeah. And I just want to repeat again, I'm 100% behind what Cy Ray wants to do with his book and in educating law enforcement. I think that's a great thing to educate them to not make mistakes like were made in this case. I will charitably call them mistakes. But I'm 100% in favor and behind him doing that, and take his experience from this case and help law enforcement be better. We want them to be better. We want them. We want. They're part of our team, and I know that we sometimes get very critical of them, and we see it as kind of that blue line and everything. But when it comes down to it, they are and should be part of our team, and we should have the same end goal in mind, which is that justice is done. And that's all we're looking for in this case.
Yeah, I think we should elaborate on the mistakes. And I know you were just being nice, Ron, but I don't think it's just being better too. I think if you do something intentionally, it's generally not a mistake. And I think that, I hope his book does bring out awareness and accountability for law enforcement to do better, but also to hold those that don't do better and that act with intention and concealment and destruction with the intent to defraud the court or anybody else. I think it's a lot more than doing better. I think there should be some pretty serious consequences to all of that.
I agree, Kristen.
And I know you were just being nice. I know you were. You're nicer than I am, Ron.
That's probably true, isn't it?
I'm not fighting you. Look at Sam staying Switzerland.
No.
I'm more passionate. I'm just kidding.
You are. And for everybody, Kristen and Sam, what you see here is how they are in real life. And really enjoy the chance I have to be able to do this with them and to work with them in the firm.
Thanks, Ron.
Yeah, Ron calls Sam and I up to the plate when, he needs some dramatics in his case, or he needs someone to make a scene, or, he needs someone to be a little less proper. Well, you know what? maybe not Sam, but I'm probably your girl. But, and then we use Ron. He's helped us so much in the earlier years of us learning to be specialists in litigation. And so when we went to Ron about helping us out with this case from his appellate perspective, because we found that to be incredibly important to this case, I don't know that he fully grasped that, this slowly went from one show to two to, it's CQ and Ron. And I don't know that Ron even knew the environment that Sam and I were kind of throwing him into, like, hey, the best way to learn is, we're going to throw you in with some sharks and see how you do there, buddy. But you've done a great job, Ron. We're all music to our ears with your change of opinions.
Yeah. Well, all right. Let's end the kumbaya. Let's start with the video again.
Yes. Okay. We'll try to get through more of it this time.
Yeah.
I'll give you first impressions, but I'll say verbose is the word that comes to mind for me. This guy likes, I think, to use big words. He likes to sound a little smarter than others. That's at least what seems to be kind of bleeding through all of this to me.
I don't agree with that. I think he's choosing words that express what he's feeling. I mean, I was an English major. Words have meaning, and the words that you choose those for reasons. I'm a writer. I sometimes will sit and and just worry over a specific word and sentence, making sure I get the one word that expresses exactly what I want. It's not because I want to sound smarter. It's not because I like big words. It's I have something I want to convey, and these words convey that. And I don't get that I don't get the same impression from this.
I also don't think it's fair to look at one writing and come to the conclusion that this is what he likes to do, as if it's a pattern. And also, wouldn't you want if you're in Bryan's shoes and you're issuing a statement and you're for the first time reaching out and you're explaining what you're doing while you're simultaneously filing an affidavit, I think you take a lot of time and use your words wisely. And I think you'd want it to come off in an educated manner. I think that's not surprising to me.
No, and 2 seconds ago, this guy just said it looks like that nobody helped him, or that, he clearly he was doing this on his own. So it's like now it's too smart for him to do it on its own. He's literally using the material words that are necessary for each of the allegations that he's making to prove up the claims that he is making. So, and Bryan is smart. Bryan is a smart man. He is not a dummy. And so I just think it's funny. This guy's like 2 seconds ago, oh, well, clearly he didn't have any help with this. And it's, blase, just so written. And then, 2 minutes later, he's just trying to be smarter than the rest of us.
Seems like you can't win either way. If it was one sentence, it would be, well, why is he only giving us one sentence? Like, I don't know. I don't think there's much to make of that.
Yeah. So I don't like that criticism. All right.
He was long known among peers for a lot of use of $5 words, as we would say in journalism. And this is his writing style. So this fits. I mean, I can tell this is authentic. This is from Bryan Kohberger. I don't have any questions about that anyway, but this is how he writes. And you can see it in his academic papers. And as many remember or need to be reminded, he was a PhD student at Washington State University in the criminology department. So this fits the bill. I think one thing that really stands out to me here is the reference to broken plea. And I think you've covered this book on your show. And it's Christopher Whitcomb, a former FBI agent, unaffiliated with this case, but he put out a book earlier this year relying fairly heavily on one particular defense expert from this case, and a lot of documents that nobody else has seen, not in the unsealed court records, not in public records. He has a treasure trove of these things and wrote a book that basically points at flaws in the investigation from law enforcement, missteps by the prosecution, and maybe pieces of evidence overlooked by the defense.
Again, why is it that somebody who has access to even more information than we have, who has seen a lot more documents, seems convinced that Bryan didn't do it? You would think it should be the other way.
Allegedly.
The other thing that struck me is that he's not in here saying, I was railroaded. I don't feel like I really understood what was going on. Like what he has said, the word he uses, I'm counting at least 3 times, maybe more, in just a quick look at this, is innocent. He says, my actual innocence is my truth. Those who believe in my innocence, to my family who believes in my innocence. This is not a person saying, hey, you know what? I've had some second thoughts. I really want to see if the state can prove this. He's saying, I'm an innocent person who's been sentenced to life without parole 4 times over, and I'm done with that, and I want my trial.
Yes, and I think there's 2 things happening here. He's pointing to, again, sort of the missteps or the coercion he feels that he encountered from his public defense team, which I have reported spent $5.5 million. If that's not an adequate defense for someone who's
let that sink in for a hot second, everybody. $5.5 million on the defense that didn't even go to trial. But go ahead.
I have comments. I have comments.
We have some thoughts about that too, huh?
Yeah, and who do you think is likely the one making the decisions about how that money is being spent? Is it being spent on experts? Is it on copies? Is it on discovery? I mean, if you're alleging that the person that has shown you deceit is also the one arguably deciding how that $5.5 million was spent, I think there's a little bit of a conflict there.
And that's the same person who has filed an appeal to
protect those entries.
Records.
I can't wait to see the billing entries.
I also think it's interesting that he's essentially saying that Bryan just keeps saying he's innocent without saying really why. And it's because this document is not the same document he's filing with the court where he's making specific allegations in his affidavit, right? So I think that it would be a wise move to not get into the intricacies of why you're asking a plea to be set aside in a document that's not a filed court document under the penalty of perjury, because all of this is being, I mean, I know that is as well, but it's all subject to interpretation and it can be taken out of context. So, I mean, I think less is more in the details associated with why he's doing what he's doing. Seems to me that the purpose of doing that is to explain to everyone that I'm now going to be speaking and I'm letting you guys know my position.
And I'm putting myself potentially back in front of a firing squad because that's how much I'm going to profess my innocence. Yeah, and if these two were actually doing what they said they were going to do at the beginning of the interview and to articulate and show both sides, they would also be addressing that 5 million in other ways too. And Ron, I can't wait to see that billing entry, Sam. I think a lot of attorneys and teams hide things in billing entries. And I do know that one of Ann's biggest offenses, Ron and I were talking about this last night, is to protect and keep those billing entries sealed, is that they were privileged. A lot of those entries contains privileged information that would affect Bryan. But if Bryan is saying, we're done, you're fired, I'm partially waiving my attorney-client privilege, then I don't see why those billing entries would not be released.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, his main argument is about ineffective assistance of counsel. And this sort of gets at that question of, I thought Bryan Kohberger waived all his appeals, but we know from a U.S. Supreme Court case, it's actually based out of Idaho. It's called Garza v. Idaho. And it addresses just this question.
That case has nothing to do with this, by the way.
I love when people throw out that case as if it's like coming straight from the Black's Law Dictionary, which everybody in the legal field goes to, but it's just like, accept it. It applies to every case that we bring it up in.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not, even if you have waived your rights to an appeal, whether or not you still possess those rights, and the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in 2019 that you do. So,
didn't that case come out this year?
Well, the one that the appellate one, Hunter, that one just came down.
Oh.
He is able to lean into that, the nuance, and again, I'll let you explain it. You're the legal expert here, but the idea that post-conviction relief is not technically an appeal, but it is something always granted under the Sixth Amendment. Again, this U.S. Supreme Court has set that precedent, and this is the way in which he can appeal if it is eventually the route that a judge and a court, ironically, Judge Hippler will be the one overseeing this. We're all familiar with him from the trial that wasn't here in Ada County in Boise. So,
yeah, and again, Kevin Fixler he's a reporter. He's not a lawyer. This is actually statutory post-conviction relief. So this is something that is expressly written into Idaho state statute as something that a criminal defendant can pursue after a conviction or the entry of a plea. And yeah, I agree. It is based on the Sixth Amendment. And that's where ineffective assistance of counsel comes in, or at least some of your Sixth Amendment rights are implicated by it. But this is something that's expressly allowed under Idaho statute.
So he will be the first to take a crack at this, review whether or not Bryan Kohberger deserves a different public defender and whether or not he's going to assign him. And then, like I said, I mean, I think the other thing is you've got sort of, I wasn't adequately represented. In addition, I'm innocent. And those two things aren't necessarily connected, nor will the innocence claim necessarily hold up to whether or not he deserves this essentially appeal route. But again, he is making a statement for the very first time. And the thing that also really stuck out to me is he says at the end of his statement.
Okay, his saying, I'm innocent, that's not really a ground for his post-conviction relief. That's more his reason underlying why he's doing this. I'm pursuing this because I am innocent and because I received ineffective assistance of counsel. And it's because of that ineffective assistance of counsel that I entered into the plea. And the plea was not knowing. There was material information that was withheld from me that I have only learned afterward that existed. And some of that may be that there was exculpatory evidence, or that there were serious questions about some of the stuff that the state was claiming. It could be about the strength of the state's case. Yeah, he's saying, I want post-conviction relief because I'm innocent. Yeah, that's not really it. That's just why he is seeking it.
And both of those statements can be right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I really do want to be heard.
So we're going to get into the legal nuance of this in a little bit. And what I think he's doing is this is not an appeal. He's asking for a withdrawal of his plea, which is different to a significant extent in that it doesn't evoke the waiver of appeal that he took as part of his plea. We'll get into that in a second, but I want to walk people through kind of how this all played out. So did Mike Baker from New York Times actually had a phone call with him, correct? Did that occur before or after this written statement?
So I know Mike, and I'm not here to speak on his behalf by any means, but my understanding is that Mike had a call with Bryan Kohberger from the prison. I think there was discussion about how a statement would be issued. He received that written statement, which you noted in Bryan Kohberger's language, and then Mike had a subsequent call with Bryan Kohberger to clarify some issues. A thing he notes in his story, and everyone should check out Mike Baker's story at the New York Times. It really is the best piece. Is the only reporter who's talked to Bryan Kohberger or received that statement, so has the best context and understanding. And it's a beautiful story. You should check it out. But did
I meet Mike, by the way, in Idaho? Is that one
you sure did?
Oh, I did. Very nice. Go ahead.
Mike has covered the case from the very first day, just like myself and others. Mike Ruiz, Brian Enton. There's a whole group. But anyways, yeah. so yeah, we'll name credibility. Gosh, I lost my train of thought. But Kohberger is obviously advocating for another bite at the apple, and I don't. Yeah, what the chances are here? I understand it's a very high bar, and we all saw Kohberger July 2nd of 2025 raise his right hand, swear the oath while standing up, and explain to the court, including Judge Hippler, that I was adequately represented. I'm doing this voluntarily, willfully, without undue pressures. I mean, he has already sworn to these things and admitted that he committed these murders.
We have statutes here in California that will allow us to set aside, for instance, a judgment, a divorce judgment. They almost always have similar language. I enter into this knowingly and voluntarily. This is fair, this is equitable, and so forth. And the judges will often require the parties to stand and raise their right hands and swear that this was knowing and voluntary and everything. And you know what happens when say a year later they come back to that same judge and say, "Judge, I was coerced and this and this and this." Do you think the judge says, "Oh no, you're committing perjury"? Oh no. No, the judge will look at the evidence and say, okay, we'll set it aside. I see lots of judgments set aside where there was that sort of language, because that's part of the coercion. It is, are you going to argue that these parts of the judgment were coerced, maybe, but this part was knowing and voluntary, where you say this was knowing and voluntary? So I don't put as much stock in those statements. Those are in there just to essentially give the party claiming it wasn't knowing and voluntary. It's to set the burden for them. And it is supposed to be a little higher burden. And sometimes they have to prove, to prove specific facts regarding that. But that's more a burden shifting or burden creating statement than something that the court is going to rely on. Oh no, I'm not going to set this aside because you said it was knowing and voluntary, and now you're saying it's not.
And taking it a step further, if part of it is that you are knowingly entering a plea deal, but you didn't have actual knowledge of exculpatory evidence at the time you entered the plea deal, then even if you take away the other issues of potential misrepresentation, et cetera, the whole point is the things surrounding what caused you to stand up in court and say yes and accept the plea are a much larger story than just the words that are recited in court that we hear assigned to plea agreements or divorce judgments, contracts, whatever type of legal agreement. We always see those.
Yeah, and what do you guys think when they keep saying he wants another bite of the apple? Because that really bugs me for some reason, because I'm like, he never had a bite of the apple.
What's his first bite?
Yeah, this is his first bite. And I forget which one of these handsome men just said that, but it really bothers me because he never really had a bite at the apple, or bite at the apple. And there was one comment I wanted to clarify because yes, we are aware of Garza and how it came out. And I just wanted you to be able to provide a little bit more relevance, Ron. Yes, it was likely admissible or relevant to this, but it wasn't the bigger issue that I think Ron was talking about.
Yeah, Garza relevant because it does. Yeah.
It's what
but this isn't really about the appeal waiver because this isn't an appeal. This is specific statutory post-conviction relief. And so that doesn't really play into now, is that something that could be brought up in this motion? I don't know. And I've thought about that and I just don't know. And I haven't researched it enough to think, what happens now if you get, this is not about whether he waived his appeal because the time for that is passed anyway. And so we are now in the statutory post-conviction relief where he's claiming ineffective assistance of counsel and a lack of a knowing and intelligent waiver of his or coercion into that plea deal. Those are the specific PCR statutory grounds. So yes, I'm aware of Garza and the Supreme Court and everything, but it is kind of a different issue right now, and I don't know that may have some play, but right now I think this is his best. This is his best chance right now to get some sort of relief.
But stay tuned. It might come up as a pressing issue as we continue through this process. Mm-hmm. And Critic Rick, we're already way ahead of you. We would love to have him on. And I don't know that we have no personal connection or relationship with him whatsoever. So we will ask if he has any interest or willingness to talk about that conversation or the article, but working on that.
Mm-hmm. All right.
So Mike has a phone call with him, and in that phone call, he says that this is about his absolute claim of innocence. Again, he is not trying to pull punches. This is not him being cute as far as, well, I just feel like the evidence really needs to be tested in court. He's saying I'm an innocent man. He goes on to say in this phone call, quote, the intention is for all of those, when asked kind of what do you mean by being innocent, he says the intention is for all of those questions to be investigated and answered appropriately in a trial setting. Why am I breaking my silence? A lot went wrong in those plea discussions. I really do want that to be heard. This to me is, again, a man who thinks he's way too much smarter than everybody else. Remember, this is the guy that thought he had committed the perfect murder, thought he was going to get away with it.
Whoa!
Where's that? He allegedly took his phone with him and drove his own car.
Yeah, that's a little over the top. So
it's a little dramatic there.
Yeah.
Sam, what do you think?
This was the guy.
I mean, I don't think there's anything to support that statement, so I was kind of just ignoring it.
I think he does that for views or clicks or subscribers
Yeah.
for his new channel. All right,
Yeah.
keep going.
Guy that
I know I
also
told everyone to
committed a
not, I
murder.
told everyone to not let this stuff bug them, but yes, it is easier said than done because it does bug us too, just so you know.
It appears for no other reason than to see if he could get away with it because he thinks he's smarter than everyone else. And I think that also is starting to come through in this written statement and then the calls that he's having, that he wants the world to know he's an innocent man. And I think he's also beginning to realize that the world's starting to forget about him. He's been in prison now and we're sick of it. This was over a year that we were in court hearing him, like you said, raise his hand, take an oath, and say that he committed these.
That is utter garbage. All of that he's saying is just utter, complete garbage. I'm sorry.
No, it is. It is. How about the other 10 times that, everyone has expressed his innocence, including himself, starting with the Pennsylvania public defender that represented him, where he was very meticulously and calmly expressing his innocence.
Yeah, they were so anxious to get a deal that we never got to know what was the motive. Why did he do it? How did he decide to do it? We got none of that. One, because there's no evidence, and two, because that wasn't required in the plea. Why wasn't it required in the plea? I think because the plea would have fallen apart.
These crimes. So let's break down for a moment what it is exactly he is trying to argue here. You brought up Garza, and I'm going to do a quick kind of understanding of the law. Garza talks about the idea that while you can waive your right to appeal, and this is so kind of splitting of hairs, Garza really says that doesn't mean that attorneys can reject their clients, the defendant's request to file a notice of appeal. It really doesn't stand for a whole lot more than that. A notice of appeal is just something you need to file in case you ever want to appeal ever. And if you don't file a notice of appeal, you essentially waive your right to it. In the Garza case, he entered a plea where he waived his right to appeal, then turns to his attorneys and says, file a notice of appeal. And they said, no, we're not doing that. You don't have a right to appeal. We're not going to file the notice. The Supreme Court said that was wrong for them to make that decision. He still had a right to file the notice, even though he's waived his right to appeal. Already, I can tell that I'm overcomplicating this. But what's happening here is different than an appeal. Anytime you waive a right in court, and that's what he did. When he entered a plea, he waived a bunch of different rights. He waived his right to trial, most importantly. When you waive a right, you have to do so knowingly, voluntarily, and intelligently. And what he's essentially saying in this new petition is that none of that was true. He says, here's some of the quotes from the petition. He says that he falsely confessed to this crime. He said that it was done by coercion, disinformation, false promises, and the withholding of exculpatory evidence. He goes on to say that he was convinced that the actual guilt was not an important factor and that his attorneys, in fact, advised him to lie.
That's a really, I think smart statement by Bryan. And I think that's a really good argument that I expect is going to be explored and expanded on as this goes on. And those are some of those words. Those are some of the things that suggest I think he did have somebody who helped him with this, and I'm glad of that. But yeah, it goes on to say he was convinced the actual guilt was not an important factor, and that his attorneys, in fact, advised him to lie. That's a strong statement because that implicates your bar ticket. We cannot advise a client to lie to the court, to commit perjury. We can't. And in fact, we can't put on a client and advocate his testimony if we know that client is lying. So I'm going to be really interested to see what comes of that, what kind of information there is, who was involved in those discussions, and what was said.
And Katie, it depends. Today it is Alicia. She helps us produce this show and kind of keeps us calendared and moving in the right direction. So she is usually the one responding from our custody queens off the clock. But sometimes it is Samurai or Ron. But for the most part, it is usually one of our amazing mods or team members that are helping all of this stuff come to fruition.
He knows this standard. He knows what voluntarily, what knowingly, voluntarily, and intelligently means. And I think that's what he's trying to say is that, yeah, I waived all these rights, but I didn't do so knowingly, voluntarily, and intelligently.
It's very possible to believe that you are doing something knowingly, voluntarily, and intelligently, only to discover information later on that proves otherwise. You know, in this case, for instance, this is just conjecture. I don't know exactly what the discussions were, but if they said, you know, they have this evidence, this and this, these are unassailable. We're not going to be able to challenge these. We're not going to be able to provide exculpatory or any contradictory evidence to this. You're dead in the water. You needed to take the plea. And he could say, okay, I know, I understand the situation. This is being done knowingly, voluntarily, intelligently. Yeah, that scared the crap out of me, and I don't want to die. So I'm going to do this, and I'll plead, and I will tell the judge that I did it in order to save my life. But then later on, if you learn, oh, the defense had a whole lot of information and evidence that they didn't tell me at the time, then no, that was not a knowing, intelligent, and voluntary waiver.
You know, look how much evidence that has come out over the last 6 months, and look at the experts that have been willing to talk about it. I mean, I'll never forget the night that the three of us were reading the book, and we had like a chat going on between us. And I think Ron was texting me at like 1:30, like, oh my God, the hair. And I'm like, what? There's hair? And I was skipping all over the book. And I ended up having to like reread it like 4 days later, because I was just, between Ron texting me and then me and Sam going back, we were all just so excited. But I think a lot of information has come out over just the last 6 months. And just imagine feeling, you know, as BK, the defendant, and maybe your family is watching, you know, some of us on YouTube, or they're getting information from other ways. And, you know, your family's coming to you going, did you know that there might be hair that was in or around Ethan's fist that you potentially were never told about? I mean, I couldn't imagine feeling super confident in my defense at that point.
Yeah. And I should be ashamed at how bad a spoiler I was for you, Kristen.
It's all right. I appreciated it, Ron, and I know that I give you guys lots of spoilers at 4 a.m. all the time. So I'll take it.
Yeah.
But yeah, Sam, you have anything else to add? And you know what? Maybe Bryan did know. I don't know. I'm just speculating on those facts, but he makes it very clear in his petition that he did not know about much of the stuff we're talking about today, including the exculpatory evidence.
And wrapped up in that is what you point out, this kind of IAC, ineffective assistance of counsel claim, that it was because they were pressing him, they were telling him false information, they were misleading him that allowed him to make this plea. So from first blush, I will say he's establishing at least the elements of withdrawing a plea. But Kevin, you sat in court, and what happened in court with the judge when it came time to take his plea?
He asked him repeatedly. He laid out the facts of the charges more than once, in fact, specifically to each of the 4 victims. He, again, beyond the swearing of the oath, he asked Ann Taylor whether or not she had represented him to her fullest extent, whether or not she left any opportunities to suppress evidence on the table, whether or not she had adequate time for discovery, which was sort of a snarky remark he was making to her because she had claimed just 2 weeks earlier that she needed untold amount of time. So he basically challenged Kohberger to you're guilty because you're pleading guilty because you are guilty. And
I don't think it's fair to point to that and criticize you and hold your feet to it. Yes, there were things that were said under penalty of perjury, but the answers to all of those questions were very self-evident if you want the plea to happen. Because you know what? If he didn't answer in the correct manner to any of those questions, that plea goes away. And then you've got somebody standing there who has been apparently scared, potentially. I think it's fair to say that he was scared or coerced into taking a plea, and scared that the case is strong enough that he's going to face the death penalty. I mean, when your life is at stake, what are you going to say? If you know that the wrong answer is going to potentially end up with you getting the death penalty, what are you going to say?
Yeah, I mean, I also just think that Mr. Kevin here is missing the point, because Bryan's not saying he didn't say those things in court. He's saying that he said those things because prior to that, he was provided misinformation, and also in the process of agreeing to accept the plea, he didn't know exculpatory information. So I think he's just missing the point, and I wonder, is it just so that you can stay on the side of this not being a new issue? It just seems like we're continuing to repeat something. I think everyone agrees that he stood in court and said this. The question now is, did he voluntarily enter that plea, or did he have enough information to meaningfully enter that plea, or was he advised or provided misinformation, or did he have that plea because he didn't have all the knowledge that he maybe thought he did at the time?
Yeah. And if they did have all of this evidence that they claim to have that would prove beyond reasonable doubt, why is everyone so scared about a new trial? I mean, he's the one that's putting himself right in front of a potential firing squad again by saying, hey, I understand by setting aside my plea and asking for new counsel that I am putting myself in front potentially of a firing squad. So if for the people that think that the evidence is undisputable and it's unequivocally going to put him exactly where he needed to be for all the pillars of the evidence in this case, which I don't know how they would be able to do. But why are you so scared about a trial? I mean, that's the way I look at it. If we really want this case to go behind us and we really want people to move on, including the families, a trial is the best way to handle it.
A lot of the same people that were angry he avoided the death penalty are now angry that he's asking to go back and face it.
Yep. I think that says a lot. If I'm one of the victims' families and I am so confident in everything I've been told and what I've seen and the evidence, and I know without a doubt he did it, then I would be welcoming a trial, not running away from it.
Yeah, there's so many unanswered questions. The biggest one, why? Well, you know what? That might be answered in a trial.
Yes.
Well, this is a good question.
And we all remember.
Hold on. Rod, Sam, this is a great question that I actually like us to answer.
My surprise, Ann Taylor hasn't come out and speak. No, we're not going to hear a word from her now until she is forced to testify in this. Her livelihood is potentially on the line on this. She's got to be very, very careful at this point. Especially
with the appeal that's pending with her billing entries as well, we've heard that there might be information with that that's cooking. But yeah, Sam, you have, huh?
You wonder, why would she want to discredit Dr. Turvey? Is that becoming more and more clear right now?
Maybe because they weren't aligned. Maybe it wasn't the strategy that was being pushed to her and that she believed as potentially the better strategy for the legal victory for both sides to get something out of this, to resolve it. Did she have a more trusting or more a working relationship with another expert that she had more confidence in? I don't know. I also know that, Turvey came at her directly a little bit. Maybe it was ego to respond. But at the end of the day, Turvey was still getting up there saying there's not a single piece of evidence that ties Bryan to this crime scene or the car. So as the lead defense attorney, I'm like, hey, you can come at me. That's fine. It kind of puts a little bit of a cloud over our defense team environment. But at the same day, he is saying Bryan didn't do this. And then we have Cy Ray, who potentially was her lead expert, her lead man that was writing all the prosecution cross-examination questions, is saying, yeah, all of these things were missteps, they were mistakes, they were intentional, and I've never seen anything like it, which is why I had to cross the blue line. And I can't answer your question of exactly what evidence we have to prove all of these things, but he did it. Sam?
Yep.
I agree with Ron. I don't think that Ann Taylor's going to talk. I think part of that is potentially it's speculation, self-preservation, but I think another large part of that is the attorney-client privilege. So I think it would not make sense for her to respond. Although I think that she's going to be called to respond based on the allegations, as Ron pointed out, maybe in the form of a deposition or because of a requirement to respond to it. But I don't think that she's going to go to the media and just say, no, and here's why. I think that would be doubling down on the potential allegations of things that she's doing wrong.
If I was her attorney,
she replied to Turvey's response. Do we think that she's not replying now just because things are heating up?
Yeah, because now we know he's seeking this post-judgment relief, and he's got her in his crosshairs. And
how will we know if he waives that? How will we know if he waives that attorney-client? Will we see something filed? Will we, if he waives that privilege, or at least in part, so that because that's the only way you're going to be able to get at the allegations. He's going to have to waive part of it.
Well, I think he is by his statements about it. I'm just saying that she's not the holder of that privilege. Mm-hmm. So in some senses, I think she's going to be called to answer, especially within the scope of what he's talking about. But I think she has to be careful in how she answers.
Yeah,
I agree.
I would think there's going to be some sort of affidavit by him that accompanies an amended pleading. And then I would expect that probably Ann would be deposed. Specifically on those allegations in the affidavit
with her own attorney.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but
didn't he say that some of these statements were made in front of his immediate family as well?
He did. So
is there a potential waiving of the attorney-client privilege by having a third party there?
Not necessarily. It could be argued, but that provides some additional witness testimony as to what was said. And yes, it's family members, but a judge in a hearing would still have to assess their credibility and not just assume, oh, you're lying because you're related. And I've seen cases where there is, the key evidence was testimony by a family member who certainly may have had motive to lie, but the judge found credible.
Yeah.
All right.
That's interesting.
All right.
Remember that very robotically that Kohberger went through the yeses and the nos, and everything pointed to he knew what he was being told. He had not practiced this per se and delivered no additional allocution or additional information beyond the scope of, yes, I am admitting I am guilty and accepting of essentially the maximum penalties, which were part of the deal in addition to no parole and waiving appeal rights.
You remember too, just for everybody listening, this took place on 2 separate days. You had the entering of the plea on one day, and then we came back later for the sentencing, which included the impact statements. Most, kind of memorable was the Gonzalez family, how powerful that all was in court. But that was really the kind of epilogue to all of it. The important part where the law was really most concerned was in that plea. And as you pointed out, it took, how long did it take? An hour or two? I feel like it took most of the entire morning.
That was a 45-minute hearing. It did feel like it went on, but the opening, if people will recall, was Judge Hippler extremely upset by certain members of a couple of the victims' families advocating for people to call his office and flood the zone to prevent him from accepting the plea, which he had to deliver information that's not even in his scope or his purview.
Yeah, I do remember that now. But we did spend a considerable amount of time going through meticulously, as you pointed out, that plea where he had him admit several different times on the record this is freely, voluntarily, and knowingly being done, that he knows all his rights, that he's had every opportunity, that he's spoken to his attorneys. And just so everybody understands, most pleas are thorough, but not that thorough. I mean, I've taken hundreds of pleas in court, and they take a matter of 10 minutes tops. This took a considerable amount of time. One, you're involving 4 counts of murder. But 2, I think because the judge was making sure to avoid all of this. So Kohberger signed, first of all.
I don't know that I accept the conclusion he seems to be drawing from the thoroughness.
I'm not at all. I'm not at all. And you see how quickly he tried to put the Idaho statesman back in his place by talking about what Hitler was upset about from the victims' families making statements, and then you have this guy Joshua is kind of right back in. Well, no. We meticulously went over all 4 of those plea deals with 4 separate victims, and then he also had another charge. But no, I think he's trying to route. Yeah.
I think he may have. It could very well have been because he was afraid that this plea might not stick. And because it was, the things that were said, the problems with the PCA, I'm sure a lot of those were addressed. And I know we saw some of that in the Franks hearing. And even though the Franks hearing didn't go that well for the defense, certainly the judge saw a lot of the problems that had arisen since. So I don't... the judge being thorough may actually suggest that he didn't think that the plea was maybe that warranted. I don't know. I'm probably speculating as much as Ritter is, but I think we both are kind of speculating.
And doesn't Hitler even say something like, "I'm not sure if you have anything to say. You probably don't." I mean, I think it was very clear that BK was probably not going to say anything outside of the scope of the instructions that. The answers that he was supposed to give it. I mean, at the end of the day, this plea deal was not happening. If he said no to any one of those things, it looks to me like they were just simply going through the checklist on the forms that have to happen for a plea deal. But if he would have said no to any of those things, or even something that was ambiguous, I don't know, I guess maybe that plea deal would have never happened.
Yeah.
So I'm not buying what he's selling with respect to meticulously going over. And this was a 45-minute hearing. Far-fetched.
I think all of that speaks more to the tenuousness of that plea deal than it does to its strength. And I agree with Control-Alt-Sleuth. People say they want answers, but they don't. I find that is the case a lot. People want to be confirmed, or they want their feelings and their opinions to be confirmed. They don't want real answers in many, many, many cases.
Agreed.
In writing, if he wants to now claim I didn't understand the words being used in court because I was having a rough day, he signed as well a guilty plea advisory form, a plea agreement, and a factual basis, a written factual basis. Signed all of those things. And then, like you said, here was the exchange between Hippler and Kohberger in court, amongst many others. But Hippler said, I want to make sure that your plea is given voluntarily, and I want to make sure that you actually committed the crimes to which you're pleading guilty, because I don't want you to plead guilty to a crime you didn't commit.
I hope Hippler stays with that. I mean, is he being honest there? Is Judge Hippler, because Hippler is this is gonna come back to him, as at least as of right now, and that's where I guess I have a little hope. Both that Hippler is telling the truth there, that he really doesn't want a guilty plea to a crime he didn't commit, and likewise maybe the arrogance of the prosecutors and the law enforcement. Okay, put him on, and we'll give him the death penalty. Use that again. Those things may be used against them. And it may be that this is one of those rare cases. And yeah, it's rare cases that this kind of relief is given, but maybe this is one of those. And those are some of the things that may play into it.
Either of you, what do you think? What do you think if this does go to a new trial? Do you think that we will see other surviving roommates, witnesses, potential witnesses? You think that we'll get to see some of these people on the stand, and maybe they get the cross-examination that potentially should have happened during some of the formal investigations? Sam, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're a witness to a crime,
yeah, maybe we'll get the follow-up
defense.
What if they get called and plead the fifth?
Interesting.
Why don't you answer that, Ron?
Yeah, what do you think, Ron?
I think that would be a huge thing. If I was Dylan's attorney, that's what I would tell her. You plead the fifth. You are not testifying. You are going to be destroyed.
You are not credible. You are taking the fifth. You are pleading the fifth. I don't disagree that wouldn't be my advice. Well, but that's their material, bushy eyebrow, even though she didn't say it in the first couple interviews, but that is their eyewitness that can put him at the scene. I mean, and her story crumbles. But Sam, would you tell her to take the fifth if she was your client?
I don't know. What about you, Kristen?
Well, now I have some inherent bias, probably. I have to be aware of that. No, I probably would tell her to keep. I would tell her to take the fifth. I think just if we just take her 3 interviews or 4 interviews alone on their face, and we just take what she says, which Sam is so good at going over, I think she's the worst potential eyewitness that any case could have.
I would sit her down. I would say, I have gone with a fine-tooth comb over all of your interviews. I've seen the grand jury testimony. I haven't seen, but her attorney would. You are not credible. If the prosecution were to call you and you are not credible, then very likely Bryan would be exonerated. That he would be acquitted. If that happened, law enforcement might have some pressure or might be convinced that the killer or killers are out there somewhere. I would tell her, I don't want you to tell me anything. I don't want you to I don't want to imply anything. I'm advising you as your attorney that if you are called to the stand, that you plead the Fifth Amendment, because anything you say on that stand could be used against you in a future potential criminal proceeding. I mean, that's what I would tell her.
Yeah, kind of how Turvey recorded his exit interview, with Ann when they decided, or when the change of plea happened. I would be recording this, my CTA to my client, not even just in writing. I would have this recorded with so that there is no question that if I was DM's theoretical attorney, that I would be telling her for many reasons that you should take the fifth.
Mm-hmm. And it's not, it's not even necessarily that I think she's guilty or that I think she did anything. I would suspect that she may know something because, honestly, I have a brain. I can look at her testimony. I can see how uncredible it is. Incredible. And I can speculate as to why she lied about what happened. That gets the alarm bells going off, and I say, you've got to be protected. Could you be pursued for participating in a murder? Yep. For aiding and abetting? Yep. For giving false information to law enforcement? Yep. For committing perjury? Yep. You are pleading the fifth. You are not going to you are not going to say anything on the stand. That's what I don't know. There is a big range of what problems there could be for her. And it's almost always speculative at that point, because we advise clients, and I've done this in domestic violence cases when there were no charges filed. There was no real accusations. I remember a domestic violence case I had where where actually my client's criminal attorney advised him to plead the fifth on a domestic violence action because the prosecution or the DA was still considering whether or not to press charges on some specific information. So we had to go into the court on the day for our domestic violence trial, and, Your Honor, my client pleads the fifth. Okay, well, then we're going to accept the allegations as true. We're going to issue a domestic violence restraining order against him. I don't believe he committed domestic violence. I think there was something reckless he had done that I don't think amounts to that. And there was something that was being considered by the DA. So, yeah, he pled the fifth, and he got a domestic violence restraining order against him because of that. I mean, you don't know, and that's why I don't think Bethany's or Dylan or Bethany would end up testifying. Frankly, I don't think the prosecution would put them on in the first place.
But would you be shocked if they testified to anything in this case?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know if the defense would call them or not.
That's what I mean.
I don't know that they would necessarily. Well,
because look at her description with BK. It was so vague. It was, my height, maybe a little bit shorter. She couldn't even really determine what skin color he had. It was athletic build, kind of athletic, but not skinny, but not too skinny. She didn't even come up with the eyebrows until later on. She said that, he was in all black and that she saw him go out the slider. And then that story changed quite a bit. And then we throw in other people that were allegedly there. If I was changing my answer, I would go back and I would never represent her. So that would be my final choice.
Yeah, I suppose the defense could call her. And I don't see any reason why they couldn't. They would have to subpoena her. But yeah, that could be, she might have to plead the fifth. So, that would be really interesting. That's something I would be waiting to see what happens with Dylan and Bethany in their testimony.
I don't know why the defense wouldn't want to call her.
Yeah.
Because she's the person who apparently is a witness, but can't actually identify him. And if she testifies under oath that she can, but has prior inconsistent statements and interviews, I think that would maybe impeach her.
Yeah.
Even if she got up and said, I don't know, I don't remember, I don't know, that could be used against her in the future.
And remember too, she couldn't even point him out with pictures, is my understanding. Chat, correct me if I'm wrong on that, but at the very beginning, she couldn't even identify him being the person that she allegedly saw. And
right. Yeah.
Yeah, and then and I agree with you, Sam. Sam really is probably the best one to go through all of her interviews and just find so many falsities or ad libs or just changes to her story. Sam does a great job with that.
Thank you, Kristen.
All right.
Yeah,
Are you
I would love
pleading guilty?
Sorry.
Snapchat. That's what I just want all the Snapchats. That's what I want. I want all the Snapchats.
Yeah. I don't know that you can get those. Can you?
Yeah, I think that's I think people think they're gone in 24 hours, but they're not. I mean,
They're not.
I believe they're out there. I want to see them all. I think between Murphy and Snapchat, we'd be able to figure this out without question.
Yeah. All right.
Because you are guilty. Kohberger, yes. I don't know how much more straightforward you can get than all of that.
I don't know what other answer he could have given and still get the plea. I mean, I don't know.
I mean, this is kind of a rhetorical question, but go ahead and weigh in on it.
Well, and again, I think that the other element here that Judge Hippler, to try to prevent this sort of thing from happening, somebody who, extreme value of the rule of law, was he asked Kohberger repeatedly, did you have satisfactory public defense? And he answered that question more than once, that yes, I am satisfied with the way they have represented me, the advice I've received. And so I think this is going to be a tall order. And again, I'm
Easy answer. I thought so at the time.
Yeah, they're continuing to repeat the same issue that they're missing.
Yeah.
He's not saying that he didn't say that. He's saying that there was something prior to that made him accept a plea that he shouldn't have, or didn't do so knowingly.
Mm-hmm.
But look at how much time has he spent talking about the same thing. It's like, get something new here, dude.
Yeah.
no legal expert, but knowing Judge Hippler and how close he sticks to the rule of law, I think it's going to be tough for Bryan Kohberger to show back up in the same.
That sticking to the rule of law, that cuts both ways. I mean, if it turns out that he was and lied to him, I can imagine a judge coming down hard on that and saying, yeah, you're getting a new trial. So yeah, that goes both ways.
Same courtroom, or a courtroom at the Ada County Courthouse anyway, and justify that the things I told you under oath in your courtroom were untrue.
I agree with you. And I don't think you have to be a lawyer to see that as well. That the entire reason that we had that plea is to address all of these issues, the potential of something like this happening down the road. And I think that an appellate court's going to view it the exact same way, or Judge Hippler first will view it the exact same way. And then if he decides to appeal that, which, by the way, would not be appealing his conviction, but would be appealing the ruling that Hippler's going to make on this petition to withdraw. But even if he does, I think any reviewing court is going to view it the same way. Like, listen, we got to have finality to these things. And the reason why we walked you through that meticulously and painstakingly was so that you couldn't now say you weren't advised or you didn't do this willfully, knowingly, and intelligently. The only caveat I will throw out there is if he somehow is able to present to a judge that he was lied to by his attorneys, that he can somehow prove that they gave him false information, I don't think this has a chance. And I think that him being able to prove something like that is incredibly rare. I have a couple minutes more with you, and I don't want to leave this without acknowledging the family's reaction to this. And specifically, you're very close with the Gonzalez family and actually spoke with Steve Gonzalez, and he gave you a statement. I'm going to read the statement, and then I just kind of want to get your thoughts on how you feel that they're reacting to all of this continuing nightmare in their lives. This is from Steve Gonzalez to Kevin saying, "We're not scared of it. I always stood by the work of the FBI agents and other people. If he wants to fight for the death penalty, that's exactly what we'll go for. And that's what he's facing. There's so much evidence against him in this case, so we're not scared of a trial, not one bit. Good for him."
Ron,
To your point, I think to continue to.
How much did we listen to Steve G complain about this investigation, the lack of effort in the investigation, how quickly things were moving, or evidence that was preserved. I mean, that is all. He's standing on the courthouse steps doing like a press release begging for extra help from the community and for anyone else that knows anything about what happened here. It's just never ending.
I have no doubt that if a trial is held and it's demonstrated very clearly that Bryan did not and could not have done this, I think the victims' families would come around because they do want justice for their deceased. And I can't imagine what it would be like to lose a child, especially in this manner, but in any manner. And so I try to understand where these family members are coming from, and I try to respect that. Let's give them what they want here. Let's give them a trial and let Bryan face the death penalty and prove his innocence.
Yeah, since there's so much evidence that nobody can describe
that
will be against him.
Yeah. I want the same thing that the victims' families want. I want justice for their children. Number one, we are 100% aligned in that. We may have differing opinions on what that means, but that is what I'm seeking. And if at some point I became convinced that Bryan did this, then I would jump on the bandwagon and hope that he rotted in jail. I just don't think that's the case. I don't see it.
Yeah, I'm aligned with truth and justice for the victims. Yes, yeah. And there was one question I wanted to throw up for you too, because I thought it was a good one. Sam, Ron, you want to jump at that one?
No. Can't just plead the fifth because you don't want to talk. I think there are cases where you might have to explain to the judge why you're pleading the fifth. I think in this instance, it would be self-evident enough that I don't think that would be a big issue. I think, again, I'm not a criminal defense attorney, but I have had to advise clients in the past that they have the right not to testify. But it generally is in a context where, they are very clearly potentially facing what could be criminal liability. But so I think you're right, Kate, but I think that in this case, the reason for the fifth would be pretty self-evident.
Yeah, and you can always plead the fifth, whether or not the judge wants to talk to counsel and the attorneys, because there might not be grounds to claim the fifth. That would probably happen shortly thereafter. But we deal with this a lot in our domestic violence cases. And I don't think some people realize the kicker to pleading the fifth is you don't get to claim the fifth when you're being cross-examined and then also offer up your testimony
Right.
at the other side of it. So I can't go in there and say, you can't ask me any questions that may lead me to liability. However, let me tell you pretty much what I saw at 4 a.m.
Yeah. Right. It's like there's competing things going on. You can be subpoenaed to court and called to testify, and you're required to answer those questions under oath, but you have a Fifth Amendment constitutional right against self-incrimination. So it hinges on that. So the assumption is there may be a reason why she wouldn't want to testify.
And then you have your star witness, the person that came face to face, eyes to eyes with the perpetrator of the quadruple homicides. You don't have, if she takes that fifth and the judge accepts it, then you don't have an eyewitness. And now
assuming she does want to testify, I think that there is some concerns with her prior interviews and the inconsistency or credibility associated with it. So if she does testify, then it's more of a credibility.
Now, Ron, if you're Ann Taylor, Sam, if you're Ann Taylor, I would want the prosecution to put up Dylan, to be honest. I would love a crack at her on the cross-examination, because I think it will be somewhat reasonable for any good attorney to go make it very clear that Dylan doesn't really have any recollection of what happened that night, or at least she shouldn't be testifying as an eyewitness.
Yeah.
She doesn't even know if she was dreaming or not.
Yeah. All right.
All right. Is this almost
We're
over?
almost done.
Okay.
You're
Well,
dragging
what I was like,
these-
yeah, there was one book, I think, Leslie and Billy, you asked me, well, considering who is part of this book, which is this guy, Kevin Fixler, I'm not super optimistic that it will be nonfiction and more of Chris Whitcomb's type of book. I think it will be a lot more, I don't know, persuasive, or an attempt at that to be more of a narrative. But hey, I like reading both sides of everything, because then I think it's really important to talk about how much stuff they got wrong. I'm going through James Patterson's book right now. Nikki gave me a recommendation to read it, and some of the stuff in there is so wildly wrong. It is crazy that this book made it to print, to me.
All right.
Families through this experience is hard to fathom. And I will say that when I spoke with Steve on the phone, he wanted to kind of walk through some different things, some potentials. This was something that the Gonsalves family was very aware could one day happen. I think they continue to have a bone to pick with the prosecutors, upset that an appeal waiver isn't really an appeal waiver. That's how they perceive it anyway. So there's certainly tough feelings there still. I know that some of the other families are really upset by this news. We can understand that. So I certainly feel for them. But I will also note that the Gonsalves family, they were not one of the families that was willing to accept the plea deal. They ultimately had to go along with it because it's what the prosecutor chose to do. But they were adamant about seeking the death penalty. And so if there is a silver lining to this, and I say that really if, it's that they might see an opportunity that if this somehow has any legs, that perhaps it gives them a chance to see what they ultimately wanted as a sentence, the death sentence. And maybe they see an execution of Bryan Kohberger one day.
Yeah, I think the Gonsalves family's thinking, let's give him exactly what he's asking for. If he wants his trial and he wants to roll the dice and put the death penalty back on the table, let's give him exactly what he's asking for. I'll be honest with you, I don't disagree with them.
I'm with Steve G.
I don't think they're going to have that day, unfortunately for them, but I would not be afraid of taking this thing to trial either. Kevin, thank you again so much for your time. Before I let you go, though, can you announce something for us? Are we finally able to talk about something that's coming up for you in the future?
Yes.
Okay. Do we care about that?
Well, I want to see what it is. Just
Oh,
kidding. Well, I just want to see what is
it's
what
the book
is
that he's working on with Baker.
Did he get promoted for
No.
making sure the public has all of the most accurate information regarding procedures and trials and set-asides and everything else?
It's the book he's working on with Mike Baker.
Oh, then yeah, we just talked about that.
Yeah. Let me see. All right, that's it.
Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. We were super excited to kind of continue going over all the new information. We will be jumping on as much as we can immediately when new stuff comes out, but nearly 4 years into it, Bryan speaks.
Should we go through some of these super chats before we leave?
I think we went through most of them, but Sam, I'll let you guys two decide if there's anything we haven't gone through, but go for it. You're up, Ron.
Seems Ann Taylor lied or coerced her client. I think there is evidence suggesting that. Whether that evidence is credible or not is going to be up to the judge. Can Hippler use his biased opinion to shut them down, or is he bound to have an unbiased opinion? he is supposed to look at this without bias. And I think that includes, bias. They're challenging his ruling before and his allowing the plea. I think I have to think and hope that Judge Hippler will follow the law without bias. Petition with the right amount demanding transparency. No, petition's not going to get you anywhere with this. This is a legal issue, and you can't override the law with a petition like that. And Labs 525 Blue Haze. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, we appreciate you. And, we're hoping to do as much to help this case for awareness and just acknowledging that there's a lot more to this case than we've seen in the other, 5 documentaries at this point. And we're just hoping to spread the word a little bit more and hope people remain objective and actually think critically and not just believe that because something is shoved in your face in the mainstream media every day for a month that it's true. And if we can help by doing these podcasts and these shows or having interviews or even just putting information back and helping the YouTube algorithm to get all of our, community more exposure, then I'm happy with what we're doing.
Yep. Thank you everyone for the comments and the questions.
Oh, and there's one more, Janet. Thank you, Janet. The $10 super chat. Prison life is so horrible. Why did I put it up there? Sorry. Prison life is so horrible. Living another 15 years or more like that would be unbearable. At least with DP, your miserable life is shortened. Only recently do we know the facts, and him is my guess. Yeah, I think that's a personal decision for everyone. I mean, the way I kind of look at it is if I'm going to be spending the rest of my life in prison with very extreme, minimal anything, I would probably roll the dice and go to trial. But I think that's a very personal decision for everyone to make. And I don't think any of us can make it until we're in those shoes.
I'd have a hard time spending my life in prison knowing I'm there because I pled guilty to something I didn't do. I'd have a hard time with that.
Same. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. And remember, hit that like, leave us a comment. What do you like? What do you don't like? And we remember everything we talked about is our speculation and opinions, and it is for entertainment and educational purposes only. But we hope you guys all have a great night. And I'm sure there's a bunch of other creators that are going strong tonight. And just remember, we're all better together.